This video was sponsored by Skillshare. Welcome friends to another review of Doctor Who Series 5. Today we tackle the return of the Silurians, who would rear their reptilian heads at least once per series from here on, and then would never be seen again after Capaldi's first episode. Normally at this point in a series, the second two-parter would showcase just how weird and wacky this show can get. Some terrifying, mind-bending and emotional episodes have taken this slot in the past, but I think the most prominent aspect of these types of stories was the quality of writing brought to the table. Unfortunately, none of these qualities can be found in the Hungry Earth Cold Blood story, which was written by the current showrunner Chris Chibnall. He wasn't entirely to blame though. This story is somewhat overshadowed by Stephen Moffat's desire to create an overarching narrative that runs throughout the series. All this and more will follow in today's video. Oh, and this story is set in 2020, so I think we're gonna be in for a good laugh. Moving on from 2020, you can spend some time in the coming year pursuing something meaningful and creative with Skillshare's online classes. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. Whether you write, draw, photograph, or film, Skillshare has a class for you. I myself recommend Social Media for the Creative Entrepreneur: Exposure, Tips, and Pros and Cons by Peggy Dean. She provides good insight into the online landscape and provides good tips for people who are thinking about or have just started making content for social media. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, meaning that there are no ads and they are always launching new premium classes. An annual subscription comes to £7 a month, and the first 1,000 of you to click my link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the review. Our first part opens in a quiet village in Wales, drilling obscenely far down into the earth for no apparent reason. Going on to the night shift, the boss's son-in-law takes over and gets sucked into the earth after finding a gassy hole in the storeroom. It certainly seemed like a rather frightening situation, given that the man could potentially be falling down miles and miles of tunnel down to his death. Our gang then arrived in Cumtaf, expecting Rio. They find some rather naff-looking blue grass, like seriously, you call that blue? They then see future Rory and Amy across the hill. I understand that this is set up for the finale in Cold Blood, but what confuses me is that if memory serves, Amy and Rory get sent back in time by weeping angels in a future episode. I will admit now that my memory of most of Matt Smith's episodes are rather sketchy, so all I'll say is that I will remember this moment in the hopes that this plot hole will be resolved at some point in a future episode. Another instance of Cold Blood setup occurs when Rory awkwardly asks Amy for her engagement ring. I don't mind the stingy behaviour that's played for laughs here, but it also just doesn't make a lot of sense. He didn't seem to care that much when they were in Venice, and only now they are in a boring old mining village does he seem to be worried about his investment. The Doctor and Amy then broke into the drilling facility, and more of that badly mixed audio this series seems to be plagued with came into play. If you're listening in stereo, you'll notice that this sound comes from the left instead of from behind the Doctor to his right. And sometimes the dubbing just sounds as off as usual.
What's that? The ground feels strange.
No, complete the process!
The pair then showed up rather cheerfully to inquire into what these people were doing. Considering that two random people in funny outfits have just shown up right after their night shift worker has vanished overnight, found a hole in the storeroom, and haven't even called the police, the lack of suspicion displayed by this character Nazreen immediately raised a few eyebrows. They say later that there's no phone signal here, but come on, how can you expect this groundbreaking drill company, yes, I'm here all week, to not have some kind of communication with at least their employees? I loved how immediately afterwards she said this line,
What are you doing?
None of your business.
and then moved away from the monitor and let the pair get a good long look at the thing. Even more crazy was how Nazreen answered any and all questions the Doctor threw at her truthfully and without hesitation. The ground then started getting hungry again, and Amy appeared to be its next victim. Seeing the soil just envelop her whilst expressing her fear about exactly what happens to her created quite a horrific moment. The music swelled at just the right time too, to hammer home that idea that the Doctor failed to save her, and I honestly loved that his trusty sonic screwdriver couldn't do anything either. I will say that I think this moment was rather premature and might have made for a really great and emotional cliffhanger. Instead, it's just thrown in here merely to separate the companion from the Doctor. I have no problem with this idea, but given how little Amy and Rory were given to do in these episodes, I have trouble understanding this decision story-wise. Suddenly, Ambrose and her son Elliot materialize memorialized in the churchyard where Rory was confused for a police officer. I actually found this idea quite funny, especially considering the strange and eerie circumstances surrounding bodies sinking into the ground. It turns out that this young lad likes his Audible subscription and correctly assesses that people are literally being pulled into the ground. As well as being a fan of Sherlock Holmes, he also seems to be big on Michael Rosen too.
They didn't steal the body from above. They couldn't have got it from the sides. Only other thing is, they get in from underneath.
We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no! We've got to go through it!
Back at the facility, our characters try and puzzle out what to do about this sinkhole that's just emerged. The Doctor claims that the ground was bioprogrammed and then proceeds to hack into their records with his sonic screwdriver. What this really has done is show a network of tunnels the lizards have been digging upwards and are going to be showing up in 9.5 minutes. Sadly, this was where the emotion of the situation seemed to be thrown to the wind. 2 people had vanished underground and the most we got out of Rory was this.
Why didn't you stop it? I tried, I promise, I tried.
Well, you should have tried harder!
When there was ample opportunity for Ambrose's father to explain to her that her husband got sucked into the earth, they just cut past that conversation and had her summarize the situation instead.
So we can't get out, we can't contact anyone, and the something that took my husband is coming up through the earth.
The plan got underway, and I won't lie, I thought it was hilarious seeing them all gaffer tape up the village with old camcorders. Mainly because most people last year would have just used their smartphones, but hey, it's not the worst idea either. Seeing Elliot doing this insanely detailed map wasn't entirely unbelievable either. I know somebody who's artistic as hell despite being dyslexic. Though why they needed it when there was a perfectly good map built into the facility's monitors seemed to make this lad's efforts somewhat redundant. Suddenly the village went dark for no reason and Tony forced a kiss on Nazreen. This moment was so bizarre to me given how little time the pair had to develop. Again, this is something I would understand happening towards the end of the episode, or heck, maybe when the pair were about to go into hibernation in part 2. I feel like this moment just tries to make up for the fact that the pair don't experience enough together to truly justify a romantic entanglement. Especially considering how attached the Doctor and Nazreen would become later on. The timer runs out and the same box falls down twice when the Doctor, Rory and Ambrose returned to the church. Elliot was then declared missing and got kidnapped by the lizard. It's done in a rather lazy fashion with these hideous POV shots, but thankfully the episode took a rather morbid approach when Elliot's headphones were found at his great-aunt's grave, shown at the beginning of the episode. Just imagine this little kid being dragged beneath the earth in this watery grave. That was enough to justify his mother's scream here. Unfortunately, the moment was interrupted by another lizard giving her the good old POV treatment, with her dad coming to the rescue and getting tongued in the neck. It not only looks terrible, but I thought it a damn shame because the less is more principle could easily have been applied here. They could have let the horror sink in a bit more before the action started up again, only for the Doctor and Rory to come along to save the day. So they kidnap Leia and the Doctor interrogates her. This was probably the most interesting scene in the entire story for me, as it introduced this idea that there's a whole bunch of people living under the earth believing the surface is theirs by right. The way she describes humans as apes and vermin establishes the antagonists as a force to be reckoned with. I also quite liked the design, the prosthetics, makeup and costumes for these 21st century Silurians. I think their appearance was a big improvement on the classic era, allowing for more visible expressions and therefore deepening the connection between them and humans. It's just a shame that most of them that appear in this story had to wear masks to save money. The Doctor then gave a rather awkward speech to the characters. This sounded so strange as the Doctor was saying he was going somewhere to rescue the Eaten and nobody questioned how exactly he'd be doing this. Even worse was his suggestion that the people have to be
The best of humanity.
which is the most vague instruction I've ever heard. He compliments them all to high heaven, yet I can't think of a single event that's happened throughout the episode thus far that could justify this sentiment. This was enough for Nazreen to clap in this super cringy fashion and basically become a bit overboard with her admiration for the Doctor. Funnily enough, actress Mira Sile was quoted in a Digital Spy article telling her agent that she would have done anything to be on this show. This speaks volumes, as this actress seemed to be playing herself from this point on.
Come back safe.
Did you touch something?
No, isn't this what it does?
Even though the TARDIS had stayed in the same place this entire time, they somehow understood that the TARDIS was going to transport them somewhere. Nobody questioned a damn thing, and this blind faith in the Doctor because the plot requires it truly made me sick. Although it was pretty cool to see bass drum foot pedals attached to the TARDIS console. Nice one, guys. This was where the episode wrapped itself up, and honestly, it's a bit of a clunky cliffhanger. Mo, Elliot's father, is seen with Amy down in the lizard lab. Then it dawned on me that the only character who would actually belong in 2020 comes along in a face mask armed with a COVID jab. We had a nice visual reveal at the end, but I think there was too much separation to make anything dramatic really pack a punch. You have 4 different scenes involved in this cliffhanger, and none of them truly had me on the edge of my seat. Had we not seen Amy until the 2nd episode, and maybe seen a little more emotion towards that fact from the Doctor and Rory, this ending might have been more worthwhile. Otherwise, it all just felt a bit flat to me. So, did it suck? As an episode itself, it's not awful, it's just a bit rocky here and there. I like the concept, there's some good ideas and the music works well here and there. There are some truly morbid moments, and I liked the updated look of the Silurians too. Some aspects I'm so mixed about though, showing either the episode's age or just plain bad writing. You have the typically undernourished audio mixing, a lot of unquestioning appreciation for the Doctor, and bland characters that just crushed my investment in the story. Let me know your thoughts about this episode in the comments below, or come and have a chat with us on my Discord server. Don't forget you can support these reviews by making a pledge on my Patreon page. I give The Hungry Earth a 4 out of 10. Coming at you live from Pirate Studios, this is Harry's Moving Media. Try squatting for a bit. Next page. Then it dawned on me that the only character who actually belongs in 2020 came along in a face mask armed with a fucking COVID jab. Armed. Oh shit. Oh, my feet. Da 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 da. That's Tracy Beaker. She's back. Why? Who knows?